All right, we're back and we're working on exercise 39.9. And let's read this one and see what it says. It says, access and update a staff table. This should sound familiar, does it? Remember, actually, when we did the database chapter, we actually did this in the database chapter. So there is a correlation here, and there's actually the opportunity here that we can copy some code, or at least look at the other code for reference. Because basically what we're doing here is kind of duplicating what we did in the database chapter, but now we're doing it through a web interface. So this is actually pretty cool. So yes, we do have a database component here, and now we're combining the database component with our Java code and our HTML code. So this is really powerful stuff, folks, the capabilities that we're unlocking here, even though the example is kind of simplistic, for all intents and purposes. So it says, write a JSF program that views, inserts, and updates staff information stored in a database, as shown in the figure below, which we'll take a look at. The view button displays a record with a specified ID. The staff table is created as follows, and you guys already know that if you followed the examples earlier in the book, that we already have that table in our database on the Apollo server already, right? So we don't have to create the database table. So if you did the previous chapter's database stuff, that staff table exists. If not, we're going to jump into the database and make sure that it exists. In fact, since we're talking about it, maybe now's a great time. Right? Because now I'm thinking, well, maybe you guys don't have that, so I don't want to be, mean and kind of exclude you here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to the Apollo server PHP My Admin interface, and I do have root access, so I can look at everybody's accounts if you want me to double check. But I'm going to be connecting to my account here, and we are working with the database named Java Book, of course with your username and an underscore as a prefix. And I do have a staff table. And in fact, this actually might be pretty handy to leave open. Right now I only have one entry in there, but at least now I know what the ID is, because one of the stipulations is you type in the ID and you click view, and then it pulls it all back. All right, so basically we need to be creating something that's going to look like this. And if you look back into the chapter, we actually did this in the chapter even, in this chapter. Okay? Although that one was called what? Student registration? So like the whole process of putting the page together, a lot of it can really be copied. So including all the HTML form elements. Now what we can't copy is all the Java stuff, because we didn't do that in this chapter. We actually did that in the previous chapter. So I'm actually going to dig into some of my files here and pull back the codes, because logic for doing a view, insert, and update, it only asked us to do those three. It didn't ask us to do clear. Did you guys notice that? That logic is already in a different Java file from the previous chapter, the database chapter. The structure for putting the web page together was from the sample problems inside this chapter, so you can go back to that and look at that code to copy it, to create the form. And then the database connection piece, of course, was done in the database chapter too. And we can pull all those pieces in and stitch them together. Now, as I say that, I want you also to think, this is how a lot of work is done out in the field, right? Well, how do I connect to the database? I don't know. Let's look at the other application and see how we connected. Okay, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and that really is the beauty of all this. So you guys give me a second here. I'm going to start switching modes and get ready to code. So I'm going to pause the video momentarily. Okay, now we're going to be jumping over to NetBeans, and we have to create another new project here. So I'm going to go ahead and click the new project button in the toolbar. And we're going to follow the same procedure we did last time. So we're going to do a web application. What are we going to call this one? I guess we could call it exercise 39.9. Or what are we doing here? Staff table. I don't know. Maybe I'll call it X39 _9, something like that. Make sure your folders are okay, wherever you're putting it. This stuff should not need to be changed. We are doing Java server faces. Then go ahead and click Finish. That part's not too bad. All right, so we have a new project folder here that we're working with. We are going to need a web page. There's already one there. No reason to recreate it, right? I know that the author probably would recommend that you create a new page, but I really, frankly, am not worried about it. We're not doing anything that fancy where it requires additional work. All right, so now we need to start to build all of this stuff, which is a little bit of work. And all the doc type stuff at the top is fine. You maybe want to change the title and maybe say exercise 39.9. Not a big deal. And then we need to start building the body of the page, and we can do a whole bunch of stuff. Now, you can, remember, intersperse regular HTML here. So if you're more comfortable writing regular HTML for stuff that's like static content, feel free. But what they really prefer that you do, that if you work in this environment, is to allow the back-end server to really generate the HTML code. So that's what I'm going to type. Okay. So you guys follow along here. I'm going to do a little bit of manual creation, and then I'm going to do a whole lot of copy-paste. I'm just telling you that right now, because if I don't do that, we will not finish in time. Okay? All right, so here we go. So I'm going to begin in the body section, and I'm going to create some output here. And if you look at creating a header, this is one of the ways to create a header. So I'm going to put in the head tag, put the closing one in right away, and we're going to just type in staff information. So that's going to turn into a heading tag. I'm going to do a line break. Since we're in XHTML, you got to do your line breaks like this. So you got to have that closing slash in there, otherwise the application will not function. From there, we are going to create a form, because we're going to use a form to interact with our users. And we'll put in the closing tag right away. So now we have a form structure. And then if you look back at the application that we did as a sample, and you know what? I made the mistake before I started class. I had the samples open in the project list, and I went ahead and closed it, of course. So I'm actually going to dig into my file folder here, where I have the sample, and I'm going to see if there's code I can borrow. Heck, why not, right? That's my thinking. So I'm going to go to, yes, I have a solution manual, folks, if you didn't already guess that. Oh, it's not cheating. What, are you jealous? And actually, I'm looking at the I'm not looking at the right spot. Okay, so I'm looking at the example problems, which is in a different spot, and I feel foolish that I'm actually recording this right now. And here's what I'm looking at, if you guys remember this. And I'm actually not going to open it up inside NetBeans. I'm going to pull this up in my Notepad++, which is over here on my second screen. And then I just want to take a really quick look at how we did this, okay? So what we did, and I want you to notice the commonalities here, because I'm really looking for shortcuts, right? So we created a panel grid with 6 columns. We styled it green, I don't know why, but we did, probably because the book said to. And then we did output labels and input text. And we did last name, first name, middle initial, right? Let's look at what we're supposed to create and see if that matches up here. Where is my PDF? It's over here, of course, on the other screen. And all right, well, last name, first name, middle initial. Hey, that's one whole line. I can grab that whole thing, right? All right, I'm going to do that, okay? And then there's address, city, state, telephone. Is that in my Notepad++ here? Let's take a look. Where'd you go? There you are. Oh, this has male, female. We can get rid of that. Major, minor. Well, some stuff is the same, but at least we got one section we can copy. So that's what I'm doing is I'm copying it. Then move this off to the other screen for now. So inside the form here, I'm going to make a little bit of space because I know I have to put stuff above and below it. And I'm just going to paste that in. And then I'm going to indent that, or not indent that, so it maintains some sort of a structure here. And I'm actually going to highlight the whole thing now and press Tab to just indent it to where it should be. All right, so I'm going to take a look here and figure out, well, we have to actually create an ID field thing up here somewhere, right? Okay, so let's do that part. That's also going to require a panel grid. And then I'm going to grab the code that I'm pulling over here. I really am in the lazy typing mode, you guys. You guys aren't figuring this out yet. It's also because of time. And I'm going to put in another panel grid. And right now, I'm assuming that this is what I'm going to call my bean. And honestly, I don't know that, so I'm just put question marks in for right now. But I do plan on pulling back something that's called ID. So I'm probably going to write something called get ID. So I'm going to leave that part alone for right now. From my example that I'm looking at here, in this section, I think we have a little bit of work to do too. So we do need an output label for last name. That's true. We do need input text. So last name input text I think is a fine name. However, the value that's going to go in here, inside the input text, that we're going to be pulling back from the database, which we're going to pull back from the Java file that's pulling it from the database. So I actually have to add a value here. And what that's going to be is in the form of a hash. So it's a pound sign, a set of curlies, and then inside here, once again, I'm putting in question marks. But I'm planning on calling whatever it is last name because it's going with last name. Okay. Now, since you got the first one typed in like that, let's copy it down to first name and do the same thing. So right here, we'll paste in value, and then we'll come back and change this to first name. Yes, I'm ignoring the underlines right now. No worries. Same thing for middle initial. And we'll just call that MI. I think that's a good name. And notice I'm trying to be consistent in the way I'm naming things. I'm planning on naming things lowercase, right? With a camel case if there's a logical second word. So that takes care of the first row where the ID is, and the second row with last, first, and middle. Okay? Now, here's where we kind of like diverge a little bit from our previous like in-chapter example, and we are now going to move on to the address. The address, bless you, it's going to be on its own row. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to paste. And this is what I'm going to do. And once again, I'm putting in question marks here because I have not named my bean yet. And if I'm smart, and I'm not being smart, frankly, I would use a consistent number of question marks because then I can use find and replace to fix it later. It's called what we call strategery, folks. So how many am I putting in? 5 question marks? 5 question marks, 5, 5, 5, 5. Okay. And the other thing I'm going to tell you right now is I'm going to get rid of this style tag here because, frankly, it's just not needed. I'm not sure why I did that green, but it must have been some example I was doing in class that I thought was meaningful at the moment, or to make a point, perhaps. All right. From there, we're going to go to city and state. So with that one, I have 2 labels and 2 text fields, so it's going to require 4 columns. And then I'll paste that in right here. Once again, replacing this with 5 question marks. And you know what? I'm going to put this all on one line, just simply because I think it looks better. I'm going to take a moment to do a Control-S to save. And then I'm going to scroll a little bit because I have this sense and feeling that you guys might still be typing to catch up a little bit. So I'm just kind of slowing down a little bit to let you catch up. Remember, people watching the video, you can always pause and catch the screen. All right, after this section here, we're going to need to add a couple more panel grids. The next one's going to be for telephone, so we only need 2 columns for this one. And then once again, we're going to change this to 5 question marks. Okay, after that one, we get to the point where we have to put our buttons in. Okay, so when we're putting buttons in, that requires a different H tag, and the command for a button is command button. Don't ask me why, that's just what they chose. Oops, not the right code. All right, and that looks like this. Once again, get your 5 question marks in there. Simple enough. All right, I'm going to freak you guys all out by jumping back to the PDF for a second when you're trying to copy code. But I want to point out one last thing that we need to add here that you might not notice if you're looking, unless you're looking really carefully. But you notice right here where the hand is right now? See that there's like a little bit of text right there? And notice this is where we're putting like a status message. So we need to create that too. So I'm going to add another section down here just for that status message. And I'm going to call it status. Right. Once again, I'm going to switch this to question marks for now. And then notice that the other thing I did here is I actually did style this red because I want that to be visible. I don't want it to be huge or any, like, I don't want like any big fancy text. I just want to be able to see it. And that's going to tell us whether, you know, we did something, and we can pump any message we want into that. So if we have like error messages from the database or success messages or whatever it is, we can put it there. So it's some sort of an indicator basically to the user that something is working or not working. All right, take your time and type that in. All right, so now that we have our HTML file created, and this is all we need to do here, except after we create our bean and give it a name, we're going to come back and change all these question marks to whatever we name the bean. So I'm looking for creative thoughts here. It might just be exercise 39.9. when all is said and done. But maybe we can think of something a little more fun, like staff or something like that. Right, so that clearly indicates that we have another step to perform here, and that is that we are going to add a managed bean to the project. So I'm going to the source packages. I'm not worried about creating a package for the code for the same reason I did before. It doesn't really matter. Complicated projects, it does. And we're going to choose JSF managed bean. Now I'm thinking, can we just call this staff? Is that okay with you guys? Let's call it staff. Leaving all these settings alone. In terms of what code we are going to use to actually do, to determine our scope, we're doing something a little bit different now. Like we talked about this request scope and view scope, but now we're interacting with the database. That's a big thing. And then we're also we're going to write code in the background. It's going to talk to the database, pull stuff back from the database, put HTML together for us or whatever it does. Actually, it's not going to do HTML. It's just going to send text back for us. So we have to think about what scope is appropriate. And, right when you start to throw the word database into the mix, and unless you're keeping track of a session, really your mind should go immediately to application for most situations. Okay, so that's what I recommend. If you don't like the name staff, right, I like it. It's nice and simple. Put something else in. Okay, and then go ahead and click finish. All right, so then we have the basic structure put together here. Now I'm going to go right back to the index HTML file, and now I'm going to do a find and replace. So I'm going to do a Control F. So you see the little box that pops up here at the bottom? All right. And I'm going to type in 5 question marks. And I want you to notice that they have these extra little buttons here, and I'm not seeing a replace. Where the heck is the replace? Did they move it? Okay, so let me see if they have a find and replace. Okay, so they do have a replace tool. So with most applications, you do Control F and it brings up both. But some applications, they separate them. So we are doing a replace. And then what it does is give you the box. What are you replacing it with? Well, I'm just going to type staff. And you know what? Usually when I do a find and replace, I test it once to see if it worked. And if it worked once, then I just do replace all, and it fixed all of them all at once. Cool, right? I went up to the edit menu and found replace. All right, and since that change has been made, I'm going to close this extra box here. I'm going to do Control S on the index page to save it. Now you see all our red underlines went away because now we have that managed bean or Java code that we can refer to. All right, now we have to do a little bit of work, you guys, and I am going to try to accelerate this process because we have precious little time left. All right, and I'm going to begin by doing this. First thing I'm going to do is inside the class, I'm going to start to declare a bunch of variables. Okay, and basically I'm going to create a variable for each one of the fields in the form that we created with the same name. So ID, last name, first name, all the same ones we use. And because I remember how I named them, it's going to be a piece of cake to do it here because I use a convention that I always use. And whatever you do as a programmer, if you come up with your own little conventions and you remember what your conventions are, it really can help save you a lot of time. So I know I got a string for ID. Yeah, I could do an int for ID too, I suppose. But usually when you're working with databases, and even if the IDs are numbers, we usually work with them as strings, believe it or not. So I recommend you put in string here. Clearly, Last name will be a string. String for first name. Middle initial. Address. And you know what? Here I am being absolutely stupid, right? Here's where you start to use your shortcut techniques, right? So I always get students saying, like, why would you ever need to do that? Well, this is why. Because I don't have to type the word string each time. So I like it when I actually run into a good example of why you use the shortcut technique. Because, oh my God, it saves a whole bunch of time. And what's next? Address, city, state. See how easy that is? Even the telephone number will go in as a string. Why? Because people might type the parentheses or the dashes, right, for a phone number. All right. And the other string that we're going to have is the status message at the bottom. And then you can put in your semicolon. All your strings on one line. Okay. There are a couple of other things that I'm going to declare as variables as globals. And what those are going to be are what we call prepared statements, which are the statements we're going to use to do our queries for the database. Those are called prepared statements. And I want them to be global because I want them to be able to go from method to method within the Java code and work. So I don't want to declare them inside of a method and not be able to move the values around. So I want them to be global. So here's how we do that. We're going to do prepared. It's all one word. Statement with a capital S. And then looking at how I did it last time, and last time I decided to go prepared statement for view, and I spelled out the whole thing, and I'm not going to do that this time. I'm just going to go PS view. And the reason I'm doing this is to use the shortcut I used before. Then I'm going to go PS insert and PS update. Remember, the book did not ask us to do a clear. I want you to think about that for a second, too. Maybe you don't want a web user to have the ability to delete a record in your database. Maybe you'll give them the chance to change it, but certainly not delete it. It's kind of an interesting thought, right? All right, so prepared statement. Notice that is flagging red. Do an Alt-Enter to show hints. And what do we have to do? We have to add the import statement for Java SQL prepared statement. The one that's highlighted is fine. So add your library at the top. I'm going to get rid of this comment section, you guys. I hope that's all right. All right. We are going to need a constructor function here. And the reason we're going to need a constructor function is whenever we call this bean, we want it to go in and set all the variables. And actually, the way to think of it is to set all the variables to an empty string to start with, because when we load the form, we want it to be blank. Okay? So the way that we accomplish that is, this is a really clever technique too. I want you to see this. Is like this. So we're going to take the ID, which is already declared, which will equal the last name. And this is actually one of those spots where I could probably just copy all this stuff here. Watch this. This is a really weird technique that you probably would never even think of doing as a beginning programmer. But experienced programmers do this kind of stuff all the time. Because basically what we're going to do is we're going to make ID equal to last name, which is equal to first name, which is equal to middle initial, which is equal to address, which is equal to city, state, telephone number. And you guys are like, you can do this? Yes, you can. And then ultimately, what is all this going to be equal to? Empty string. So the way that this works is really, whatever's on the right, you assign to the left. So empty string goes here, which goes here, which goes here, here. Got them all in one fell swoop. That just saved like 10 lines of code. Isn't that cool? We don't show you these techniques early on because you guys would go, what? I don't understand. Right? But I love these techniques. These shortcut techniques just save so much time. All right. The other thing that we're going to do when we first call upon the class and construct it, right, we initiate a database connection and connect to the database. That has to happen whenever we call on this class. So right here, we are going to call init. I'm going to abbreviate here, and I'm actually going to say initDB. Init, initialize the database, which is going to be a method. I know it doesn't exist yet. However, I can hover, right? And then it says Alt-Enter, so Alt-Enter. And it says create method initDB. Okay. Right? Heck, why not? Now I want you to notice that unsupported operation exception not supported yet. I'm going to get rid of that, sorry. Because frankly, we don't need it. But we are going to be connecting to a database. So with a database, you got to make some provisions for if that connection fails. And that's really an important step. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the code that we wrote in our other database applications and I'm going to move it in here. But first I'm going to set up a try-catch for it. So I'm going to put the whole thing in a try-catch. So let's set up the try. Create the curlies. And then right away, right after this curly, let's put in a catch with parens. And I'm just going to call it, I don't know, exception, and we'll give it the name, I don't know, X, something like that. We'll figure out what to do with the error in the aftermath. Chances are we'll probably throw a little thing in here that, puts a little message in the status field and said, oops, no database, or something like that. Okay. So now we're going to build our database connection, and if you guys have some of your older code for connecting to the database available, where you have your username and all that junk, right? You can pull that in. But I'm going to come in, and I'm going to do this, and you'll recognize this, right? So first, we'll call the driver. And then I'm going to output to the console if you want. It's up to you. You don't have to. Then we're going to call upon the connection class. Now, if you're smart, you're opening up your database work and copying all your connection stuff from there right now. That's what you should be doing, right? Because I'm building it piece by piece. Here we are missing some libraries. So I'm going to Alt-Enter after hovering. Try it one more time. It is not playing nice with me right now. Okay, so we want to put in the connection. We also have the driver manager. Jason tells me control space works. Let's do control space. Does it automatically. Thank you very much. The only problem with the control space approach, of course, is you're assuming it put the right thing in. Yeah, it will. So right now, let's assume that's okay. We do need to adjust this stuff, you guys. Right? So we are actually connecting to Apollo. And your database should be named with your username and an underscore as a prefix. And then these are the username and password, of course. And mine is AAAAA and password. One thing I do want to remind you is if you don't have the database loaded up, you're having issues with your database, you can use my username and password and connect to my table if you want. Not a big deal. As long as you get it to work, that's really the important thing. All right. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start building our queries piece by piece. And we're actually going to do some of them right here in this database part because you got to think about what's going on. All right. We're loading a driver for a database. We're connecting it and logging in. And then we know for a fact that we're connecting to the staff table and pulling in all the stuff that we just set up, ID, last name, initial, address, all that stuff. That's a given. We're only working with one table, so we don't have to make it so it adjusts to a bunch of different tables, just that one. So I'm going to go ahead and actually start to put together some of the prepared statements, but first I need to set up a query just to look. Okay, so let's do that as a string. And I'm just going to call this query for view. And then I'm going to add the following statement, which is a little bit long, and it's plain text, and it is a SQL statement. And I'm going to paste it in, and then you guys can copy to your heart's content. All right, so really all I'm doing is I'm storing the query in a string, and then when I run the prepared statement, I'm going to call the string in. So I'm kind of separating it into two steps. So this is query for view. Now what will follow this is the prepared statement for view. So I'll do PS view with an equal sign. And then I will add the following code. I'll do connection. So I'm calling on the database connection. And then I'm going to prepare the statement. It's just a method like this. And then I drop in my variable, which holds the query. Or I could actually type the query right between the parentheses here. But the reason I'm doing that is so I don't have to, because I did it above. So you see the approach? So really what's happening is I set up a string up here, put it in a variable, and then I'm just dropping it in there so that my prepared statement is nice and clean. All right, move on. Time is not our friend right now. We got 3 minutes to finish a whole application. Can we do it? Probably not, but we'll try. All right, so now we're going to do query for insert. And then here is the insert code. So now you should be asking yourselves as I paste that in, what's with all the question marks? Well, we don't know what those question marks are going to be at this point. That's what that indicates. Same thing that we did in the previous statement. We did PS view. We're going to copy this, and we're going to use the same approach to build the prepared statement for insert. So we do have to change this to insert and this to insert. We got to do one more of these. And this one's for update. So here we are with a string. And we're going to do query for update. And then we're going to equal sign in there, and I have my SQL statement all set to go here. and paste it in. You guys should be recognizing the pattern now. So we're going to do a PS update, connection, prepare statement, and this one is called query for update. So add our semicolon at the end, and believe it or not, we're all set to go. That's all that's going into our try. In the catch, I'll leave it up to you. You want to be one of those geeks, like the author, who thinks that it's a great idea to throw in a stack trace. So if your application crashes, it crashes in the browser and shows people complicated error codes that they can't figure out. Go for it. That's how you do it right there. All right. But it also might be handy. If you maybe put in a little message, it goes status equals, there is a problem with the database. Please try again. Something like that, right? In which case, that's a little more friendly to the user, in my opinion, especially when they're looking at it on the front end through the web. So I would actually recommend not putting this in if you're really writing a real-world application, unless you're debugging, right? So if you're building the application, put that in, and if it fails, it'll at least give you some sort of database error message that you can latch onto and research and fix. That's my thinking, right? But when you're deploying to the users, who the heck cares? Just tell me it's not working. I don't really need to know what the stack trace is, right? I don't want to look at variable values and things like that. Okay, that's my 2 cents worth. The other thing we need to do is we do need to do gets and sets for all the variables. All right. Well, that's a lot of code, right? Because there's a lot of variables. All right. Might NetBeans have a tool that's just like Eclipse that does that automatically? I'm going to pause for a second and see if you guys can figure it out. All right. So I think we have figured it out. And what's funny here is when I paused, I did click Insert Code. So I right-clicked in the application, and my box is not popping up, and I'm not really sure why. All right, so for whatever reason, my right-click insert code wasn't working, but if I did my Alt key and the insert button, that was working. So you can do getters and setters. You can select all. And you know what? I don't think we need them for the prepared statements now that I'm thinking about it, so you can actually uncheck those. I'm just double checking my code to make sure that's the case. It is the case. And then go ahead and generate. And of course, that saves us a boatload of time, right? The one thing I don't like is where it put them, because it put all of those up at the top. And, you know, for the kind of application that we're building, I don't think that's appropriate. So I'm going to cut those, and I'm actually going to put them way at the bottom. Now, mind you, this is inside the global region of the application. Okay, so inside the last curly bracket, so we'll put them here. Okay, hopefully everybody's got that part of it complete. All right, I'm going to scroll back up now, kind of above all these getters and setters, and right below the init database thing that we did. And right here, I'm going to make a little bit of space, and I'm going to get prepared to write our first major method in here, which is the view method. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to create a public method. It's not returning anything. All it's going to do is help us to generate the stuff that's going into the view. Okay, so we're just going to call it view because that's a logical name, and some curlies. Now, what I did last time, and I'm looking at my code and I'm trying to remember why I did this, but for some reason I did a system out print line and I passed the ID to it. And I think the reason for that was just to make sure that whatever ID I typed into the field when I hit the button was being received by the method, that at least made it that far. You know, kind of like a status check, you know, of sorts. From there, I'm going to build another try-catch because remember we're interacting with the database, so you're either going to like do exception handling or a try-catch, or in some cases both. All right. Now we're going to start calling upon our prepared statements here, which is why we did the work above and why they were set globally. Because now I don't have to type all that code in here, it's up above. And because we set it inside the init database, now all I have to do is call the statement, all the SQL code comes with. See, I like that approach a lot. It's clever. So I'm going to call PSView, prepared statement for view, and I'm just going to do set string and the number 1. Now the question you should have is, what the heck does that mean? And actually I forgot a piece. ID. Now if you, okay, so it's yelling at me right now because I forgot to put in the catch. So I should be smart and do that. And we're not going to be throwing a regular exception here. We're actually throwing a SQL exception. And you have to put in SQL in all caps, and then a capital E, and then exception. And I'll still call that X. And, you know, if you want to like go ahead and finish this part off, you can do the same thing we did before, which was this. So you can do the stack trace if you wish, but I would prefer that you just put in a message, and you could use the same message if you want. There's a problem with the database. Maybe you would say something like, cannot generate view, something like that. I do need to put a library in for the SQL exception, so control space to add the library. Back up here, we also need to put in a result set. This is also going to require a library. So control space. I'm just going to call mine rset, basically because that's what I called it last time. I'm looking at my old code, so hey, what the hell? Let's just copy it. Then I'm going to call psView, and then I'm also going to call the execute query command, which is already built into it, and it will just run. Now, we grabbed the query, and we ran it. Now we have to pull back the results, and the results are going to come back maybe with one result or many results, but we need to like get it up onto the screen and get the strings out of the database, out of the result set, and then pass them along. So here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to write an if statement to check to see if the result set, its next item, is pulling something back. So if it's not pulling, so if you type in a number and it doesn't find it, this isn't even, it's not going to pull back a result. See what it means? If it does pull back a result, then it will trigger this code. And here's where we do this. So we are going to take the last name, from the result set, and we're pulling the string back. What does the 1 mean? That just means the index value of the box it's being sent back to. Is really the simplest way to think of it. Okay, so if we're doing it for last name, we got to do it for all the other fields we're pulling back, and then the index value is going to change by 1 each time, so then you end up with this. So you end up with all the plain old text fields, last, first, middle, address, city, state, and telephone, getting the strings back, and then incrementing that number by 1 each time. All right, well, what if there is a problem? Well, then you might want to throw in an else, and then just maybe output to the console not found. And heck, if you're doing that, maybe you can output to the status field as well, if you want, not found. And I would call those completely optional. You really don't even need to put them in, right? Because, you know, if you type something in and it doesn't find it and you don't have an else, nothing will appear. They kind of get the picture, right? It's not working. Although it's kind of nice to put things on the screen too, just to get it working. But let's say it does work. Maybe down here you could go status equals data retrieved, like that. So that is our view method. Okay, next method we need to write is one to do insert. So right down here, right after, I'm going to start preparing that one. I'm going to do a public void, call it insert, some curlies. Once again, we're going to do a try. And if we're trying, then we better be catching, right? So let's do that right away. And for the catch, I need to throw in some parameters here. Once again, we're going to do a SQL exception. And we'll just follow the same techniques. There's no reason to really change that technique at all. And I must have typed something wrong here. Let's see what I typed wrong. All right, I'll do my Alt-Enter. No, I want the catch clause. In fact, I like that generic message. We can just throw that in there. Still not sure why it's throwing that, but let's put in some statements up here and maybe it'll kind of fix itself. So with this part, because we already generated a statement for insert, the pattern is kind of the same as what we did before. We're going to do PS insert, and this time, little change. We're not getting the string. We're not looking at it. We're setting it. So we're going to type set string, and then we're going to put an index value. We're going to start with 1, actually, and yes, we are using ID. Can you guys anticipate the pattern here? We are going to do PS insert dot set string, sting, not string, string, not sting, 2, comma, last name, etc. You can see I misspelled this, so of course everything breaks. But I'm going to see if I can find a little copy-paste shortcut here. Seems like almost right. Let's first go change the index values. So go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think we need one more. I think there's 8 of them. And of course we're going to go last, first, middle initial, address, city, state, telephone. Then, once we've done all that, because really what we're doing here is we're grabbing it from each one of those fields, associating it to the variable we're sticking it into, and then after we've done that, then we actually need to run the query. So we do our ps insert, .execute, and it's not, here it's an execute update. Empty parens, because it's all built into the statement already. And then, not a bad idea to throw in a little status message. So data inserted. Just like that. So there's our insert. I suppose the error message should match what's going wrong. All right, we got another method to write. We're almost done, folks. So this one, of course, is going to be the update. We're going to do a void on that, and we'll just call it update, lowercase, empty parens, curlies. And of course, we're following the same pattern. And what's cool about this one is practically identical to the one that we just did, which is a nice thing. So yes, I am going to copy some code. I'm going to copy this whole try-catch, the whole thing, and then just tweak it. All right. So all of these where you have insert, you want to have update, right? Because that's what we called it. So if you want, I mean, you could use your find and replace there. I'm just going to do a copy paste, I think, and I'm just going to do the double click trick. So by the time I find and replace, I'm already done. We'll change that to updated. One little change though. These index values are kind of weird, okay? And unfortunately, we're running so short on time, I don't have time to really explain it. But we need to reorder these. We actually need to make that 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it has to do with the way the query is being pulled back and the way the data is stored. But trust me, this is the right answer. And Brian, you remember this from last time, right? Yeah. But this was actually kind of a fun one, I thought. And I'm going to change my message here to cannot update data. Hell, you know what? If we're going all to all this trouble, hey, why not actually write a clear? Should we? Yeah, why not? You know how you do a clear? Remember how we did the init? We had the constructor function, and we set everything to an empty string? Remember that? Please say yes. Yes. Okay, good. I'm going to use that same trick here. How about that for a clear? Is it doing anything to the database? No. Now the question, of course, you should have in your head, Control S to save, by the way, is do I have a clear button on the form? Oh, no, I do. I did. I have one there. Okay. I'm checking to see if there's any other things I need to do here, and I don't think so. I think our application... Oh, okay, excellent question. No, the result set is only inside the view area. That was the question. Is it only there? Yes, it's only there. That's the only place that it's used because think about what view does. View is the one that goes to the database, pulls the information back. So we have to put it in a result set to be able to look at it. Insert and update assume that you've already viewed, so you don't have to read the result set. It's already on the screen. And then when you change something and hit update, it just changes the thing that changed. So yeah, that's, you can call that clever, I guess, if you want, but it is what it is. All right, folks, let's be brave and run this. Since we were running Glassfish before, it looks like it's still running, so hopefully it'll just work. But I will warn you, and sometimes this happens, if you run a program and it crashes or acts weird, Glassfish is not the most stable of servers, so sometimes you actually have to stop it. And the way you do that is you go to the Glassfish tab and hit the stop button and then hit the start button. You can also restart the server. You can hit the double button. And that's only if we have problems. I'm hoping that that's not the case, so I'm running it right now. It is popping up in my second screen. I do need to do a little refresh in my memory. I know that I have in my table one entry in the staff table, so I need to double check what that entry is and what the ID number is so I can actually pull it back. So I'm finding it, and it's 11111. Okay? So that's what I'm going to type in there. So I want to see if my view works first. So in the ID field, I'm going to type 11111. Oh, that's one too many. And view, whew, it worked. I'm going to tell you what, every semester it's not always so confident. Okay? Now, of course, let's try our clear. That worked. Let's create a new record. Let's do like 22222 or twos or whatever. And yeah, I'm going to do my ASDFs here, sorry, but time is short. We're seeing, okay, it sounds good. The state field's got to be 2 letters, so we're just going to do WI. Yep, that's my office number if you want to call it. So go ahead and do an insert. Data inserted. Let's clear it. Let's type the 222 in there again, and then do a view to see if it stuck. It did. We can look at the database. Let's do a refresh here. It's in the database. All right. Now let's take this record here and actually put in like some real names. My name is now Jones. All right. Let me check to see if that truly updated. It did. Folks, this is a successful application. All right. I have to terminate the video here because we are encroaching on our other class. But thank you for sticking around, and I got it all done, and I'll get the video posted. So if there's something you didn't catch here in class, you can go home and watch it and fix it there.